Alright, heads up sports fans. This video is going to contain at least one major spoiler for Halo Reach, and then potentially some other spoilers for Combat Evolved 2, 3, and ODST. You good with that? Alright, sweet. Let's go. I don't think there are any bad levels in the Bungie Halo pentology. Across those 5 games, we were graced with 56 different, unique levels, and the honest truth about every single one of them is that I think all of them are pretty good. And I recognize that there are certain levels that probably conjure up a bit more frustration than others. My understanding is that the library is somewhat infamous. I'm told that there are people who don't like playing as the Arbiter, and from personal experience, I can tell you that I find Cortana to just be a real beating of an experience. But the truth here, or at least my truth, is that there's nothing wrong with these levels. There's nothing bad about them in a way that detracts from the overall, and even the worst parts of these levels are overshadowed by the best parts of these levels. So if there's no bad levels to talk about, that leads to a different and much more interesting question. Which one is your favorite? Because while I'm sure that there's no one out there that views every level with total love, I'm equally sure that every level is totally loved by someone. Someone out there thinks that Zavo Highway is the hottest thing since Solar Fission. Someone among us thinks that Kazingo Boulevard is the best thing Bungie ever did, and there's someone who thinks the level design and concept of the Oracle will never get the praise it deserves, and I like to think that all of these people are correct, because every single level is great in some way. Each level finds a way to highlight and showcase an element of what makes Halo as a series, as a concept, so captivating. Now, if you've been around for a little while and you're familiar with the deep lore of my channel, you'll know that I have a certain affinity for the concepts of self-sacrifice and the human will to survive that's present in these games. You'll also know that I'm something of a sucker for anything that gives me a new perspective on a thing I already know. And across these 5 games, and their 56 levels, I don't know if there's a single level that highlights those concepts, establishes those perspectives more effectively than my favorite. No other single level more adept at showcasing the worth of humanity and the value of the human life and establishing it as a thing worth sacrificing for. Because here, in Reach, Bungie's final Halo game, their final chance to establish what they want this story to look like, what they want these characters to be like, they swung hard to establish a new perspective. And it gave rise to my favorite level in Halo. Halo Reach, Level 7, Exodus. And I want to tell you about it today. Talking about Exodus is a little difficult because the value of Exodus doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is a level with both game and series-long plant and payoff, meaning that this level alone doesn't necessarily mean as much as some of the other standalone levels. If I had to compare the experience of just Exodus alone to something like Combat Evolved's Pillar of Autumn, I think it's pretty clear that Pillar of Autumn would be the more captivating level. After all, one requires setup, and the other is the setup. So let's just give Exodus the setup it needs. I think it's deeply important for this video to recognize that rather than a firefight with alien hordes, rather than a ship-based siege or an alien megastructure, Winter Contingency, the first real level of Reach, opens with Spartan Fire Team Noble responding to a missing trooper squad, a downed comms relay, and that the first interaction we have with a presence outside our squad is with a handful of civilians that have been bunkered down since something happened last night. But it's hard to get clear details from them because they don't really speak English and the squad doesn't speak Hungarian, except for George, who translates perfectly. He's from Reach, after all. Which means rather than these civilians having to explain in broken English why they're scared, George is able to listen to them in their native language. Literally, the first encounter in this story is a group of Spartans meeting, aiding, and accommodating as best they can a family of normal people. Cool, Thane. 2 thumbs up. Why does this matter? Because Spartans weren't supposed to do this. It's well established in the lore that the concept of the Spartan program and these soldiers that it produced predate human contact with the Covenant because they weren't made to fight the Covenant, they were made to fight people. The earliest days of the Spartan program outline the theoretical use of these biomechanically enhanced monsters against non-compliant human colonies and star systems, by the grace of a graver threat alone, that being the appearance and subsequent violence of the Covenant. Is it so that the Spartans were not often and actively used against you and I, only because we lived light years away from Earth and it maybe felt weird to pay taxes to there? This level of kindness, or at least accommodation to normal civilians, is fundamentally foreign to the inherent design of the Spartans, and because of that, it means all the more to me to see it happen. And what's so cool about Reach is that the game is sort of filled with it when you really think about it. Later on in this level, after contact with the Covenant, recovering the remains of the trooper team, and reaching the downed relay outpost, George talks with one of the survivors of the Covenant attack on the outpost to try and comfort her, going so far as to go mask off in the most literal way.
Our name George.
Shada.
I'm not sure the best place to highlight this, but I also want to mention George specifically being called out for being non-compliant when later in the game, Noble Team meets with Catherine Halsey, who specifically calls out George for the modifications that he's made to his armor.
What have you done with my armor?
Just some additions I've made.
Indeed.
Which would maybe be nothing if Emil were not literally right there. Maybe Halsey just doesn't give a shit about Emil, but I'm choosing to read this as the game highlighting that George is something of an abnormal Spartan, both in how he presents himself, but also how he presents himself. He doesn't dress right, and he, in particular, is especially defiant to his theoretically intended function as a Spartan. He doesn't do it because it's his job, he does it because Reach has been good to him. This kindness is about repaying a favor. It is so unique to Reach in these games to present the basic man as worth fighting for. Not just as a concept, not just as soldiers protect humanity, but to a personal basis. To look a survivor in the eyes and try to understand that specific grief. To recognize the value of one's home and the justness to fight for it, and to lay down your life to defend it if need be. Exodus comes right after the death of George. Right after his sacrifice, dying, thinking he'd saved the world. Dying, having saved very little at all. And the beginning of the level goes out of its way to showcase that Noble Six, that you still very literally carry him with you. Which means, of course, Exodus is not just about trying to save some civilians, it's about making sure that George's sacrifice is real. That him thinking that he just saved the world is as true as possible, and in that sense, Exodus becomes incredibly serious to me, and it's no surprise that the game takes it equally serious. Here, there are civilians in the crossfire, and while you won't be punished if the Covenant happen to kill some, if you yourself happen to, then the game will instantly drop you, reloading to a previous checkpoint. You're not allowed to make that kind of mistake here. Now, look, I'm not going to try and tell you that Reach is a game about civilians, or that Exodus is the most important single level in the series for the whole of the Halo story. What I am going to say is that Bungie had to make very specific decisions about this experience because, like I said, they knew that Reach was their last chance to tell a story in this world. With that in mind, I think it's also important to recognize that we have never seen non-combatant humans in this way before. Combat evolved? No civilians, nothing even resembling civilian life or structure. Halo 2, and we're on Earth for a little while, but still no civilians. Despite the game involving a massive battle through the streets and towers of New Mombasa, there isn't a single non-combatant human to be found. Halo 3 brings us our first non-UNSC humans, which can be found during the storm, but these factory workers are still considered active combatants as they appear to have been shanghaied into the proud UNSC 1st Company militia group. And while that is neat, it's not quite the same thing as a non-combatant civilian. In ODST, we can opt in to learning about the story of a handful of civilians during their time in that aforementioned New Mombasa battle, but we never actually meet any of those civilians. It is not until this final game in the Bungie pentology that we get this experience. Exodus marks the true beginning and the rapidly approaching conclusion of a Covenant invasion on Reach, and truth be told, that's not really the right word. Invasion. This is more of a conquering, and it's your job as Noble 6, the lone Spartan in this mission, to aid where you can, to save whatever can be saved, to carry forward the spirit and soul of George. Exodus is split broadly into 3 different sections, those being, as I will call them, Cityside, Airside, and Beachside, and each of them comes with a very specific, valuable experience. Cityside will see you, believe it or not, inside the city, first alone, trying to make your way to the fight, and then finding that fight alongside a scattered UNSC trooper team and the civilians they're trying to keep safe. In more than one instance, you're shown that you arrive on scene quite literally with not a second to spare, and I love this new angle that comes with this sort of level. In previous Halo games, it wasn't uncommon to have Marines alongside us, but having civilians in the firing lines as well adds an extra level of complexity to the firefights that we haven't really seen before. The entire point of this opening section is just to secure a landing zone for an evac Pelican to help a small handful of civilians get to a safer place. And quite frankly, it's not exactly easy. Even on lower difficulties, there are multiple brute chieftains capable of one-shotting you or any member of your entourage, and the NPCs present in the level really put the artificial in artificial intelligence. Even so, I still find it worthwhile to try and prevent as much civilian loss as possible, and for me, that means getting one-shot by chiefs way more often in this level than any other, as trying to keep these dumb idiots alive often means putting myself in positions to draw the most attention. With civilians secured, it's time for airside. This ride through New Alexandria on a Hornet is only really supposed to serve as a sort of transit between Cityside and Beachside. You don't even get to fly the Hornet yourself, which is a bit of a downgrade from previous levels of this design in other Halo games. Rather, this is treated as a sort of on-rail shooter. Just shoot the bad guys and let the game worry about the rest. Within the context of Exodus, however, Airside takes on a more tragic tone than any other similar section in Halo. Airside is able to show that the desperation and tragedy experienced in Cityside is city-wide. There are so many different combat set pieces, each defined by UNSC forces and different civilian groups caught up in the combat, and the truth is, you can't save them all. You're given around 10 seconds maybe to interact with each skirmish, and if you're not able to, say, kill the brute chieftain on this ledge, then that's it, I guess. It's a section that invites you to recognize that the suffering in this city is occurring on a scale that cannot be overcome, and that you are, largely, powerless to stop it.
Oh my god.
Mayday! Mayday! Negative! We're going down!
Son of a bitch. I can't watch this.
Fox Actual, should we send search and rescue birds?
Negative, dispatch. No point.
Beachside is the final section of the level, and it feels distinctly Halo. There's a mess of civilian evac ships on the far side of the water, but they're pinned down by a Covenant Corvette overhead, preventing them from taking off, all the while Covenant ground forces are beating down the doors to get in. Your objective is to group up with these Marines and fight your way through the beachhead, reactivating the 2 separate anti-air platforms in the area to give that Corvette something real to worry about. And that's a good bit of classic Halo. If I had a nickel for every time I played as a Spartan teaming up with UNSC Marines to storm Covenant-held positions on a beachhead, I'd have so many nickels. But what makes this one special is that the whole time you're fighting, you're on open comms with the pilots of these evac shuttles as they explain to local command, with increasing desperation, that the Covenant are actively breaking into the shuttles, with families and children on board. Never before has a set piece like this had genuine pressure put on the player to complete your objectives, and yes, okay, I admit, the time limit is artificial. You can sit on the beach for as long as you want and everything will be fine. But for someone like me, this presentation in the grander context of the level and the story and the Halo universe matters so much because it ends with gratitude, with success, with the recognition that you've saved so many lives. George didn't save the world, and you couldn't save the world. But you saved everything you possibly could. I like to think that that means something. It is a compelling format for a level. You've got your rising action, you've got a moment to breathe between set pieces, and you've got a properly explosive third act. From a purely mechanical plot perspective, it is a perfectly good Halo level. But the truth is, Exodus is more than its mechanics and its plot points. It is the culmination of a very cool thing Reach has been doing with its tone and message, insofar as to establish that people, normal people, not just as a concept, but as the literal representation for you and I, are worth fighting and sacrificing for. And as a result, I don't just think it's a good level, I don't just think it's one of Reach's best, I think it's one of the best across the entire connected Halo series. It is just so unbelievably cool to me that this is what Bungie chose for their swan song. To know that this was going to be their last chance to tell a story with Spartans, their last chance to decide what they wanted Spartans to look like, how they should act, and all of that comes to totality with Exodus. My favorite level in Halo. Thanks for listening. So, a little post-production fun fact for you. I got crazy food poisoning coming into week 3 of this project, which definitely stressed the whole one video every 21 days thing a bit. We still got it though, and it ended up being a nice little reminder about not saving difficult parts of projects for the very last. Good thing to take forward. Really quick, before I go, I need to say thank you to Jordan, Ivan Thanosi, Daddy Biscuit 22, Device MD, Late Night Baker 24, New Kind of Tired, On and It's Too Much, T.Log, Charlie Bell, and Ginger Crow. These kind executive funders, and quite frankly every funder over on Patreon, are an incredibly important part of me getting to make the videos I do. If you want to see your name in these credits, get these videos early, or just help support the work you enjoy, then for as little as $1 per month, you can make the jump over to Patreon. Thank you.